Dragons are very evolved monsters. They're mentioned in almost every culture with unique histories, even though they often share commonalities within some of their stories. This mixture of evolved dragons can be seen very clearly in pop culture. All over the world, you can buy dragon paraphernalia. In books and movies, this is highly evident. You can also own your own domesticated dragon. It's not just children's books in which you can find dragons. The modern dragon is appealing to all ages. Sometimes books or movies focus on grandiose dragons becoming domesticated, others flirt with the idea, and some sources keep with the tradition of the dragon being a more terrifying and powerful monster. Some people actually believe that dragons exist and point to animals as examples of what the dragon looks and behaves like. So where did the dragon come from? This appears to be a great source of debate. Smith suggested diffusion of the idea of the dragon from Egypt, which presents a problematic Eurocentric point of view. Another scholar, Robert Blues, debunked that train of thought. There's also the ever-popular proposal that dragons developed from dinosaurs. This may seem feasible because of their shared monstrous features. Robert Blues explores the idea of dragons evolving from myths with the understanding that myths also come from somewhere else first. His specific text explores the idea of dragons coming from the idea of a rainbow. Levi Strauss also harks the importance of dragons developing from rainbows in Australian culture. However, there's not one definitive answer. If you look at specific cultures, you can find very distinguished origins of dragons. I'm going to take a look at a couple of specific histories of dragons tied to very specific cultures and mythologies. At first glance, people might sort dragons into traditions of the West and traditions of the East. And indeed, that is what Wikipedia does. This is not a fair statement, as there are also dragons found within cultures that do not fit within the categorization of the West and the East. Persian dragons, Aztec dragons, Mayan dragons. So while there are categories beyond Eastern and Western dragons, there are two specific cultures within Eastern and Western traditions where dragons have developed and have a rich history, namely the Chinese dragon and the Nordic dragon. These two distinct dragon legends have been highly appropriated by other cultures. The Chinese dragon is said to have originated and carried one of China's great rulers to heaven. Another tale tells of dragons honoring Confucius the day he was born. In fact, there are quite a few different tales of dragons originating in Chinese culture. Stuart Lockhart argues that dragons in Chinese culture need to be examined according to their county, and not just looked at as one image of a dragon for the whole country. One example is the Cantonese bobtail dragon. The story is about a snake that was told when it came of age it would ascend to heaven to become a dragon. In the meantime, a few children played jokes on the snake and cut off its tail before it was able to ascend. In revenge, the dragon released a violent storm upon the city to show its power once it had ascended to heaven. This story is specific to its region and is an example of dragons existing for the purpose of teaching children a lesson. While there are regional specific dragons, one of the highest functions of the dragon was a symbol of power. Many Chinese emperors wore robes with dragons patterned onto the cloth. Not only was this supposed to represent an idea of protection, but the emperor was also associated with the dragon. In a sense, the dragon and the emperor were deified. The dragon and the emperor were seen as yang, while his rule was seen as the yin. The Chinese dragon was also featured on palace walls, displayed as the idea behind weaving staircases, played iconic roles in Chinese New Year festivities, and are featured on pottery and ceramics made mostly for the elite during the Ming and Qing dynasties. So what does the ideal Chinese dragon look like? A basic description of the dragon includes the head of a camel, horns of a deer, the ears of a cow, the neck of a snake, body of a fish, the scales of a carp, the claws of an eagle, the eyes of a devil, and the paws of a tiger. It's also divided into 3 equal sections. The imperial dragon has 5 claws, while the ordinary dragon has 4. This is not to be confused with the Japanese dragon that has 3 claws. It dwells at the bottom of the ocean, but can also ascend into the heavens among the clouds. During the Ming Dynasty, the color of the imperial dragon was red, and during the Manchu and later dynasties, the color was yellow. The Chinese dragon is also said to be deaf, but have keen eyesight. In Nordic stories, each of the characters are said to reference some part of the human nature. The dragon is said to reference greed. One of the most well-known Nordic dragons is Fafnir. He wasn't originally a dragon, but transformed into one because of his greed and was later slayed by a man of many names within the Nordic region. These stories developed from oral tradition and were later written in ancient texts, much like medieval manuscripts. The Codex Regius is the primary manuscript from where the Nordic legends are said to have come from. In Norse mythology, the god Thor is said to have defeated the Midgard serpent, another type of dragon with a long, winding serpentine body, and has had many names over the ages. The story of the Midgard serpent has a few different proposed endings. One of those stories tells that the monster was terrorizing coastal regions and Thor smashed the beast down to the bottom of the ocean with his mighty hammer. Other tales tell of the monster stretching its body to surround the earth as a sort of protection. The Midgard serpent is also sometimes thought of as a precursor to the Loch Ness monster. The image of the dragon in Nordic culture is not quite as distinctive as the dragon of Chinese culture. The main features of both the Midgard serpent and of Fafnir is that they both have long serpentine bodies and are typically depicted as quite vicious. This imagery has influenced many artistic trends of dragons being depicted on buckles, boats, clothing, and shields as protective and gruesome images. Both of these cultures are highly influential to the region surrounding them. The Chinese dragon is said to have been the inspiration for dragons found in Japanese and Korean cultures, while the Nordic dragon has had a heavy influence on developing tales in the Western region. In comparison, dragons of both cultures seem to be water and serpentine based. They both developed from very specific mythologies tied to the cultural needs of each civilization. Another important note is that the tales developed in each culture predate Christian traditions and ideals of how monsters can fit into society. These cultural needs that the dragon displays for each culture are very distinct. In the Nordic tradition, typically the dragon is seen as something to fear and something to be conquered. It is seen as an other and something that heroes representing the standard of society will be able to defeat. In Chinese culture, the dragon is much more accepted and seen as a source of power associated with the highest form of leadership. In this sense, the dragon is exalted as an other, as the emperor has claimed the image and associated it with himself. In pop culture, one of the popular trends is that of domesticating or taming the monster. This can be seen in the movie How to Train Your Dragon, based off of the children's series written by Cressida Cowell. In this movie, the young and unlikely Viking hero, Hiccup, goes against societal norms and tames the dragon featured in the video, Toothless. Increasingly in American pop culture, writers, producers, and all of the people in charge of making these movies emphasize the ideal that the other is not as terrifying as we were raised to believe, and it can be tamed. This dragon teaches children how to behave in relation to others and has become normalized. Additionally, the features and traits of the dragon have been appropriated from both of these traditions of dragons. Toothless, while terrifying and elusive, is also a sort of power that the main character associates himself with. By taming Toothless, Hiccup is able to show his dominance over this fearsome creature. Put together in this movie, the dragon, the other, is something to be feared and awed and ultimately to be tamed.